Everybody hear me? I got a call from a Navigator land agent in December 2021. I had never heard of the Navigator Heartland Greenway pipeline until I got that phone call. And by the end of the phone call, my blood was boiling when I realized what the company had in mind. And luckily, my background enabled me to contact some people that could help us. Can you go back one slide real quick? I'm a retired Marine Corps judge advocate. I served for a little over 26 years. For those who may not know, judge advocate is an attorney. I'm a member of the State Bar of Texas and the Bar of the Supreme Court of the United States. I am not an Illinois licensed attorney. So I'm not going to give specific Illinois legal advice, but what I say here is not necessarily going to be Illinois specific stuff. Or at least it won't get me in trouble with the State Bar of Texas. Next slide. Navigator wanted to run across 3,600 feet of our farm down a 14% slope into the Spoon River bottom through terraces that have been in place since 1982, drain tile that have been in place since 1982, a grass waterway that overlies 16-inch parallel tiles. And they told one of our neighbors that this trench could be left open for anywhere from 1 to 3 months from the time it was excavated till the time it was filled in, because once the pipe sections were connected, they would have to be tested for pressure to make sure that they don't leak. And I thought about this past summer. In July, we had 9 inches of rain on that 14% slope in 1 month's time. If there had been an open pipeline trench there, the river bottom at the base of that slope would have looked like the Mississippi Delta from all the erosion that would have taken place. And slide. This is what that slope looks like. You can see the far right, that ridge top in the distance. The pipeline was going to go just beyond the crest that we can see here and down to the right. That's how steep that is. And you can kind of see it. That's my side-by-side in the waterway, how it starts to go up almost immediately from the bottom. Slide. Significant events. When this got started, I thought the company had stolen a march on us. I thought this was hopeless. There was nothing we could do. I assumed the company had been preparing extensively for some period of time, and I thought that was it. But I thought back to law school, and I kept thinking, who would fight something like this? And there was a case that we studied the very first year of law school called Sierra Club v. Morton. And it clicked with me that maybe the Sierra Club would oppose something like this. So I Google searched, got a Chicago phone number for the Sierra Club. The person I called put me in touch with Joyce Blumenshine, who put me in touch also with a couple named Pam and Lan Richard, who eventually helped us form Citizens Against Heartland Greenway Pipeline, an Illinois not-for-profit. And I kind of got shanghaied into being a president, and my wife, I think, had some misgivings about this, but I discovered that we were quite fortunate because our vice president ended up being a lady named Kathleen Campbell, who is a professor emeritus from Southern Illinois University College of Medicine. Our treasurer is a lady named Karen Brocklesby from a big farming family in Christian County. Our treasurer is a lady named Marilyn Shelley from Macomb, who has extensive experience working in libraries and is an amazing online researcher. And our board member at large is a gentleman named Steve Hess, who farms about 3,000 acres a little bit southwest of Bushnell. And we hired an attorney named Joe Murphy from a firm called Meyer Capel in Champaign. And when we hired him, told us he had never been successful before at the Illinois Commerce Commission. But The only way you can fight one of these companies is to intervene in the proceedings at the Illinois Commerce Commission. I mean, you can rant and rave all you want, but unless you are an intervener, you're not part of the official record. And the cost to fight one of these can be, for an individual intervener, $80,000 to $100,000 or more. And so that's why we formed Citizens Against Heartland Greenway Pipeline. We ended up getting over 200 members. I think our current total is 211. And our dues were $500 per member per year. The group that's fighting Wolf has a flexible dues schedule, and it's based more on your ability to pay as opposed to a set amount. But we intervened along with numerous corporate interveners that had interests that would have been affected by Navigator. And the key dates in this, looking back, on 6 September, the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission unanimously denied Navigator a permit in that state. And almost immediately, news stories started popping up that Navigator was pulling its land agents out of South Dakota and parts of Iowa. And then the next thing we saw was that on the 29th of September, Navigator filed a motion at the Iowa Utilities Board asking to put its proceedings in abeyance until next year. And then on October 10th, it filed an application or a motion at the Illinois Commerce Commission asking to withdraw its current application. It had earlier this year withdrawn its first application, claiming that it was going to add a route. What actually was going on was it wanted to sequester the CO2 in Christian County. No one in Christian County at that time had even given it a right-of-way easement, and it couldn't get sequestration easements. And so it refiled and added a route down into Montgomery County, where Litchfield is, to try to get sequestration sites there. But it filed that request to withdraw its permit application, and then just last Friday, while I was minding my own business, lifting weights and doing cardio at the Y in Galesburg, it put out this press release saying that it was giving up on its project. So we, I guess, are living proof that if you put up a determined resistance, you can beat these companies, because we beat these guys like crazy. And I'm going to tell you some of the things that we did that worked. Slide. One key bit of information, I don't know if you can read this, but I've got a large chart. This is Navigator's right-of-way progress chart. And the case manager, Mr. Mark Maple at the Illinois Commerce Commission, in his direct testimony pointed out that Navigator was doing very poorly getting voluntary easements from Illinois landowners. And it released a chart like that under its first filing, and after a year, it had only gotten some 6% of the easements that it needed on its original route. So it refiled, and this is kind of amusing. I had a Chicago Tribune reporter and photographer come out to my farm this past winter, and I gave them a copy of Navigator's original right-of-way progress report with the abysmal numbers. And the lady ran an article in the Trib quoting those numbers. So when Navigator refiled, we had our attorney submit a data request to the Illinois Commerce Commission asking for the right-of-way project progress chart under the current filing, and Navigator filed this. I mean, you could just, as an attorney, the whining tone and the motion was beautiful. They complained to the commission that an attorney representing landowners had given a copy of their right-of-way progress chart to a Chicago Tribune reporter and was using it to foment opposition to the pipeline. And I filed a really snarky public comment on the ICC website in which I said, I'll give you two guesses as to who handed that chart over to the Tribune reporter and your first guess doesn't count, because I wanted Navigator to know that I was personally after the company. But I would urge you, and I'm sure your attorney, since he represented us, is probably requesting this same data from Wolf, because the case manager in his testimony said, talking about Navigator, he had never seen another company applying to the Illinois Commerce Commission that had done that poorly getting voluntary easements from landowners. The most recent report that it came out with in October indicated that it had not yet even gotten 15% of the voluntary easements it would have needed for its right-of-way. And he also commented that it was doing very poorly trying to get what are called sequestration easements to put the stuff underground. And one of our arguments was, if you don't have a sequestration site, you have a pipeline to nowhere. And so that was a key piece of evidence. Some other things that you can do. You're probably getting approached by what are called land agents for this company. Navigator had them, and we got offers in the mail. And as Navigator got increasingly desperate, the amount of money that it was offering per acre for the right-of-way easements kept going up and up and up. The latest offer to a cousin of mine who owns a field right across the road from me and a field up to the north valued his land at $27,500 an acre. And realistically, that ground, if it went to auction, was probably worth around $10,000 to $16,000 an acre. But these companies are trying to entice people to sign up. And if you don't want this pipeline on your ground, don't sign anything that these people give you. But, and I'll tell you something else, save everything you get from these companies in writing. If you ever down the road get into litigation with them over the value of your land, under Illinois Rule of Evidence 801D2, those offers to you in writing, like the one to my cousin saying his farm is worth $27,500 an acre, if he were to go to court against Navigator, and Navigator said, that land's only worth $10,000 an acre, he could introduce that offer as an admission by a party opponent, Navigator, as evidence that Navigator considered that land worth $27,500 an acre. So save everything you get from Wolf or its land agents and everything that you get from the Illinois Commerce Commission. I mean, file it away. You don't have to respond to these offers, but save everything they give you. And another thing, you don't have to let these people survey your ground. And in Iowa, they have a statute that says a pipeline company can come onto your property and conduct a right-of-way survey without your consent. And you can't, there's been litigation over that. Navigator lost one case, won another, and got mixed results in a third. And at the time it folded here on Friday, it had 2 appeals pending before the Supreme Court of Iowa. I'm not sure where those are going to go now. But one thing you can do, I'll mention this. I got a call from a Navigator land agent last November, and I first thought I would hang up on this clown. And then it dawned on me, he was calling long distance from Jacksonville, down by Springfield. It was late in the afternoon. I'd already been to the gym, didn't have much to do, and I said, instead of being rude and hanging up on this guy, I'm going to keep him on the phone as long as I possibly can. And I started engaging this guy in meaningless chit-chat, talking about farming and this and that and the other, and he was from Mississippi, and he couldn't understand why I wasn't taking this money, and I'm explaining to him that farming in the Midwest is not quite like hanging tobacco and chopping cotton down in Mississippi. And my phone, of course, I could put on speaker, so I put it on speaker, and I thought, I got to take some clothes out of the dryer, unloaded the dryer, I threw a load of wash in, fed the cats, cleaned the litter box, and I'm still chatting to this guy. I kept this guy on the phone for nearly 2 hours, running up his employer's phone bill. I was never going to sign an easement with him, but that was 2 hours that he could not call another landowner that he might have been able to sucker with his sales pitch. And you could probably make a game of this if you wanted to, like have a contest, like, okay, who wastes the most time when the land agent makes his initial call? Who says, hey, you know what? I'm getting kind of busy. Could you call me back in a couple days? You could play this game on and on and on with these guys. But just something to think about. But the most important thing you can do to resist these companies is, unless you're independently wealthy, is to join this group, Citizens Against Predatory Pipelines. I guess you would say, living proof that you can beat these companies with a concerted, determined effort. And another thing that you can do, slide please, is you can go to this website, noillinoisco2pipelines.org, and find a gold mine of information on this subject, and spread the word among your friends and neighbors. Even if you're not a landowner, if you live near a landowner, you're at the same risk from these pipelines that the person who has it on their property is at. And one thing I will mention, when you get these offers from the company, this is something that affects farmers kind of uniquely. The offers from Navigator included something that was called yield loss for your crops. They were going to pay you 5 years of yield loss. This can be really significant if you are a farmer renting ground, because that yield loss payment by Navigator was going to be made to the landowner. Who experiences the actual yield loss, the landowner or the farmer renting the ground? It's the farmer renting the ground. So if you're paying cash rent and the pipeline company pays a yield loss payment to the landowner who's renting to you, you've got an issue with that landowner. Is that landowner going to say, oh, hey, I just got X $1,000 from this pipeline company, but, hey, I realize it's really yours? I'm not sure that that's going to happen. Now, in my case, I share lease to a cousin who's a descendant of our great-grandfather who originally owned all the farm ground. So I told my cousin, on a share lease, we share expenses, we share revenue. I said, if I get a payment for yield loss, I think I owe you half of it. But that is an issue that you should keep in mind if you're a farmer renting ground. But as I said earlier, save everything these companies give you and get any promise that they make to you in writing. And save all the written materials that they send you, save everything that you get from the Illinois Commerce Commission. And this thing down here about public comments. I made lots of public comments under the Navigator docket number, and so did a lot of our board members and a lot of landowners. There are hundreds of them out there. Everybody who has a computer can go on to the ICC website and file a public comment under the Wolf docket number, which is 23-0475. 23-0161 is the Navigator docket number. You can go under there. You can take a comment that I wrote against Navigator and just change some of the wording and tailor it to Wolf. And you're playing a numbers game against these companies. Navigator had a pipeliners local union, 798 in Oklahoma, set up a site where people could just go into the union's website and crank off a form letter. There are hundreds of these form letters under the Navigator docket number that begin, "As a leader in the biofuels industry, Illinois is uniquely situated," et cetera, et cetera. And then it ends, "Carbon capture is good for Illinois." I actually made a comment on one of these. I can't remember if it was this docket number or the first one that Navigator filed, where I said it appears that there's only one person in the entire pipeline industry who is functionally literate in the English language, and that's the one who created the form letter, because all the other folks can't do their own writing, so they're just copying him. I had a couple snarky comments that our attorney told me I should probably tone down, but everybody, couple things to keep in mind. These land agents are not your friend, nor are these pipeline companies. If you're confronted by one of them, if they come by your house, call you on the phone, assume that you're dealing with someone who missed their calling in life when they failed to go into business selling used cars or vacation timeshares, and conduct yourself accordingly. I cannot emphasize this enough, they are not your friend. They will make all sorts of promises, and you need to remember they have one goal, which is to build that pipeline across your property as cheaply as possible. And I'll give you an idea of what this industry can be like. I was at a landowner meeting. I won't name the pipeline company, but one of my neighbors, an elderly lady, approached a representative from the company and said, "Hey, you guys are planning to build this just within a couple 100 feet of my house. I'm going to be in danger. You need to move it." The man looked at her and said, "Ma'am, it's cheaper to pay a wrongful death claim than to move a pipeline right of way." And she kicks herself. She participates in our Zoom meetings. It's Cynthia Reynolds. To this day, she kicks herself that she didn't have her phone recording that conversation. But that's an idea of what kind of an industry you are dealing with. And watch out if you have elderly relatives who own ground that may be approached, or elderly neighbors, or absentee landowners. We are hearing some anecdotal stories, one in particular, where a lady was kind of the family matriarch, and she dealt with a Navigator landowner, signed an easement, and then told her children, her heirs to the farm ground, "I just made you all kinds of money, and here's how I did it." They were horrified when they found out what she had done. And one other thing to think long and hard about is, don't sign anything in the form of an easement or a survey permission form without talking to an Illinois lawyer who has experience handling pipeline and utility easements. I've been talking to one. He is not representing people at the Illinois Commerce Commission. He is strictly dealing with people who are approaching him, they were approaching him about Navigator, but he's got some wolf clients. And when the Navigator people were approaching him, he was telling them, "Hey, before you hire me and pay me money, see about joining Citizens Against Heartland Greenway Pipeline. But if you want to talk to someone who has experience," he gave me permission to disclose his name. His name is Jerry Quick, from a law firm called Massey and Quick in Galva. Here's what can happen to you if you get one of these easement packets in the mail and you sign it without consulting an attorney. We are just hearing today that some people down in Montgomery County signed easements with Navigator, and yesterday they found out that Navigator had conveyed those easements to a wind farm company. So, depending on the language in that easement, if the easement doesn't say this is exclusively for the purpose of conducting a carbon dioxide pipeline and perhaps fiber optic cable pertinent there too. If it's just an open-ended document, that could be conveyed. And depending on, I talked to Jerry Quick. He said more than likely if it was a right-of-way easement, it would only be useful to a wind farm company as a site for an above-ground or underground transmission line. But I mean, if you don't want a pipeline on your property, do you want a transmission line for a wind farm? I doubt they would put up a turbine, but that's just something to keep in mind. Real estate transactions are an entirely different breed of cat. If you sign a document with one of these companies and you don't consult an Illinois lawyer with experience handling easements, you're asking to be taken to the cleaners. And just keep that little example from Montgomery County in mind. One other thing, even though we beat Navigator, I view these companies as a common enemy of anyone who owns farm ground. We're being told that in order to achieve this carbon neutral goal in 2050, or by 2050, it's going to take 65,000 plus miles of CO2 pipelines. By comparison, the interstate highway system in this country is less than 48,000. And these companies are primarily targeting the Midwest. So you may not think you have a dog in the fight right now, but you very soon could suddenly find your land being sought by one of these companies for a right-of-way. Don't hesitate to approach us for help. That's my email address. Right now, every witness who testified for us at the Illinois Commerce Commission is providing testimony for Citizens Against Predatory Pipelines. Our attorney, who has been successful, essentially has a template now as to how to beat these companies like a tom-tom. So you guys may actually stand a better chance of defeating Wolf than we thought we stood of defeating Navigator, because Wolf is going through a higher percentage of really productive farm ground than Navigator was going to. Navigator was going through parts of Hancock and Fulton County that are heavily timbered. Wolf is going across parts of Macon County, Logan County, Tazewell, all that nice farm ground up in northern Peoria County, up through Stark and Henry counties, and I predict that those landowners will go nuts when they realize that somebody is trying to target their property. I probably used up my 20 minutes, but I will stick around after this and answer any questions you have. I could probably talk for the rest of the evening about this, but unlike most lawyers, I will agree to shut up eventually. Quickly, there was a question about if you catch these people on your ground, can you shoot them? Couple things you can watch out for. I still gnash my teeth over this. Last year in Sangamon County, 2 different township highway commissioners observed people working for a CO2 pipeline company that I will not name, cutting chunks of pavement out of public roads. And I heard this from our Vice President, Kathleen Campbell, during a Zoom meeting, and I said, that has got to be a crime in Illinois. And I did some research, and it turns out it's not just a crime, it is a Class 4 felony called criminal damage to government-supported property. So I took this information and wrote letters to the sheriff and state's attorney in Sangamon County, and they started an investigation, because what I wanted to do was have these people arrested, because the Bubba out there cutting the chunk of pavement didn't do that on his own initiative. Someone issued him an order. Everyone who participated in sending the order down to that guy was involved in a criminal conspiracy to commit a Class 4 felony. I was trying to get the guys that were cutting the pavement arrested so they would give up the names through the company's organization chart and get all those people indicted. Unfortunately, these two highway commissioners were the kind of guys that I don't really want to get involved, I don't want any trouble, so they didn't really document this. If you see that going on, and it's happened in other states, so it's apparently something common to this industry, and these companies are notorious for underhanded tactics, please document it, photograph the people, photograph the vehicles, the license numbers, and immediately call law enforcement. I'll buy you a steak dinner if you can get some of these people arrested and indicted. If you see them on your ground, mark your land, no trespassing. According to the Illinois statute, you can also put purple paint on your trees for some reason. Mark your land, no trespassing. And then if you catch these people out there, don't shoot them, because, unless you're placed in reasonable fear of death or serious bodily injury, call law enforcement and get them arrested, because that is called criminal trespass to real estate. It's not a felony. I think it's a misdemeanor. But ask the people who come out to not only arrest them, but to seize their vehicles and equipment as evidence. That'll throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into the company's operation. While we're talking about percentages of CO2, real quickly, Navigator was bragging that at full capacity, its pipeline would sequester 15 million metric tons of CO2 per year. Out of that 15 million metric tons, only 0.35 was going to come from its one Illinois source, the ethanol plant at Galva, 2.33%. The rest was coming from 20 out-of-state plants. Now, you think 15 million metric tons sounds impressive. I checked the U.S. EPA website. In 2021, the United States as a whole emitted 6,340 million metric tons of CO2. Wolf claims it's going to transport and sequester only 12 million metric tons a year. I was discussing this with some of our people, and one of them said, man, the amount that these pipelines want to transport, it's just a drop in the bucket. And I said, it's not even a drop in the bucket. It's barely a thin layer of condensation on the outside of the bucket. I mean, these companies are masquerading as environmentally friendly. They're just trying to make money at your expense. One other thing, contact your elected officials. You are fortunate. I've had our representative, Travis Weaver, out to our farm before. In fact, I keep him updated on this. His chief of staff is here tonight. Travis is in session, so he couldn't be here. But the representative I used to have, Dan Swanson, Travis, and my state senator, Neil Anderson, are all opposed to giving eminent domain authority to these CO2 pipeline companies. So you do have friends in public office. And I would urge you to make your concerns known to them. They've been very, very receptive. Travis told me he met with Navigator people and told them to their faces, if you want eminent domain authority, I do not support what you're doing. So keep that in mind.
John, earlier in your speech you were talking about intervening with the ICC. Define what you mean by intervening.
Intervening means you file a motion to become a party to those proceedings that the pipeline company has started. The pipeline company files an application with the commission, and then you can intervene if you want to oppose that. And so Citizens Against Heartland Greenway Pipeline filed as an intervener. There were corporate interveners in there. BNSF Railway, because the pipeline is going to be crossing railroad rights of way. Numerous local governments, counties intervened. In fact, our attorney is representing, the attorney that represented Citizens Against Heartland Greenway Pipeline was also representing a number of local governments. The ICC is required by statute to pay attention to what local governments tell it in these CO2 pipeline applications. One other thing I'll mention, people are talking about what happens if we lose, we can appeal this. I've discussed with several Illinois lawyers my opinion that the Illinois Carbon Dioxide Transportation and Sequestration Act is ripe for an equal protection challenge under the 14th Amendment. If this were an oil or gas pipeline applying for a permit from the Illinois Commerce Commission, it would not automatically get eminent domain authority. Carbon Dioxide Transportation and Sequestration Act gives a CO2 pipeline company automatic eminent domain authority if it's approved. So that right there is unequal treatment of landowners. You cannot fight them the same way you could fight an oil or gas pipeline. And the statute also declares these things to be in the public interest. And I've bounced my theory off 3 different Illinois lawyers, including a retired judge. And the retired judge heard my argument, and his response was, works for me. So this potential 14th Amendment challenge out there is not a wild hair I got up my ass some night. I've given it some serious thought. So there's a lot you can do, and delay is the enemy of these companies. If you can tie them up in litigation, they're not generating a penny of revenue or a penny of tax credit until that pipeline is built and transporting product. And right now, they're essentially floating on investment capital. And I'm sure.
Are they doing the same thing elsewhere right now?
Well, Wolf is only building through Iowa into Illinois. Navigator wanted to build through 5 different states. Primarily Iowa, bringing the stuff into Illinois. It was also going to tap some plants in Minnesota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. So it was dealing with 5 states.
Wolf was just established in the state of Illinois last year.
Yeah.
So they're not as big as Navigator.
Yeah.
They decided, they were watching their friends in the money grab, so they decided to jump into it. It's pretty much what it comes down to.
And
So we're their test dummy, I guess?
well, I'm gonna sit down. We need